This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. Year Ahead is our Hit the Ground Running New Year podcast series where we chat to our friends in news about what they've got their eye on this year, and in true Squiz form, we get their recommendations. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
Andrew Williams will be a familiar name to many of our listeners. He's our first guest for this series, co-host of Squiz today. Andrew, welcome to News Club.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Andrew, we hired you for a few reasons. You've got great news judgment.
Thank you.
You're a really good podcaster. Really enjoyed listening to you on podcast. You're also a top bloke.
Thank you very much.
What we came to understand as well as you get into the team and get more and more comfortable, you've revealed a few special subjects that you have up your sleeve. One of which is entertainment.
Yeah, pretty much anything entertainment I'm into. I've often said the gamut from musical theatre to professional wrestling, which are not as far away as you might think, those two particular subjects. They're both an art form. So, yeah, pretty much anything, usually the nerdier the better. I'll try and steer clear of too much of that stuff over the course of this. But, yeah, films, TV, books,
You're
games,
the guy.
You name it, I'm usually into it.
You actually have credentials in this too. You are a film and TV critic. You do, what did you say to me, for your profession?
Yeah,
watch
I
things
do
on
professionally
TV.
watch things.
That's
yes,
true.
That's right.
You have a spot on radio where you talk about TV and film. So, he's not just interested. He's actually got the chops as well.
Yeah, we're not half baked.
Not at all. Let's get into it. To begin, let's talk about last year, because, it's always good to just reflect on the year that was. The entertainment story that really stuck with you from 2024, Andrew.
Yeah, so this just beat out the Eras Tour, which I only dismissed because it was arguably the last 2 or 3 years has been so dominant. But I ended up going with a movie that I could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and not because it's good in any way, shape or form. I often think movies that are bad are much more interesting than movies that are good. And this one is called Joker, Folie, Deux, and it is the sequel to a movie that came out in 2019. Now, you might remember Joker. Joker won the Best Actor Oscar for Joaquin Phoenix that year. He's obviously a fabulous actor, and the movie was enormously successful. It made over $1 billion worldwide. It was made for $60 million. So think about that profit margin. Most businesses would kill to have that sort of profit, and it was an enormous success. So when the sequel came out, people thought this is going to make $1 billion again, and then they added Lady Gaga to it as Harley Quinn, who in the Joker world is his kind of paramour. And it just absolutely tanked, like I've never seen. It didn't make back its budget, which was $200 million when you add marketing to it, and was just pretty much a fail on a critical commercial level.
You said to me, because I haven't seen it.
You and a lot of other people.
And a lot of other people. And I'm not a big follower of that kind of genre of film anyway. However, you said to me that there's something potentially deliberate about the failure. So can you talk to us about that?
So if you haven't seen Joker, it's essentially the movie's Taxi Driver and the King of Comedy in clown makeup. But a lot of people loved it, really loved it. But this was a success. And it was a success in particular because it was adopted by a particular group of society, young men, sometimes referred to as incels, who have kind of a pretty toxic relationship with the world at large. And they kind of saw in the Joker character a reflection of themselves and their frustrations with the world around them.
Right.
And so when this second movie came out, it was a musical, which a lot of people didn't know. It had Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, and it was basically a direct criticism of the people that loved the first movie, of that particular group of people that loved the first movie. And because it was a musical, they didn't go to see it. And those that did go to see it hated it.
And were offended?
And I think we're offended by it. Some were offended by the content, and some were offended by how bad it is. As a musical theatre lover, it's also a really bad musical.
See, I'm hearing Lady Gaga, I'm hearing Joaquin Phoenix, I'm hearing musical. I'm there.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Yes. And that's kind of the thing. It was kind of a movie for no one, and almost intentionally. And I remember watching it going, who is this for? Why have they done this? What series of decisions have led us here? It's an absolutely fascinating business story as well as a creative one.
I think the thing that, and just before we leave 2024, the thing that has stuck with me around 2024 and entertainment, and I blame you for this in a lot of ways, is highly talked about shows, and I'm referring to ones like Baby Reindeer and The Menendez Brother. A lot of it's really grim stuff. There's also been, I mean, just in the podcasting world of entertainment, true crime just continues to soar. What's that about? This idea that we want to watch this super grim kind of, I don't know, I guess form of entertainment. Why it gets our attention,
My understanding, and obviously, I'm not a psychologist, but I would say that what I understand from people that do love these sorts of things, and I am close to one of them, is that it's an escape. It's a window into a world that you don't want any part of in real life. So if you're looking into the grimness of true crime, it's sort of like how people describe looking at a car crash. You want to look away maybe, but you can't. And I think in this case, people are just really interested in the darker moments of human nature, but they don't want to necessarily experience them personally. So entertainment is a really good way to experience them with some kind of remove and understand more about psychology and all those sorts of things without having to actually meet or interact with any of these people, which obviously you don't want to do. Nobody probably wants to meet the Menendez brothers or be stalked like someone in Baby Reindeer, but stories about it are interesting because it's so far removed from what our normal lives generally are.
Do you think it's also got to do with needing cut through as far as the plethora of entertainment options we've got and all the streaming options we've got? There's always in these big shows like that one scene that's so shocking that you kind of talk about it, but you kind of don't talk about it, and then people get curious. And it's like, is it a strategy to cut through?
I don't think it's a strategy, but I think it does happen naturally. So, for example, the best example of that is Baby Reindeer. So, Baby Reindeer, people used to talk about a specific episode of that show,
episode 4 or whatever it was.
4, that you're not going to believe what happens in this, and that kind of drove this word of mouth. There was almost no promotion for Baby Reindeer when Netflix first dropped it. They clearly didn't think it was going to be a hit. They thought, we just made this and, we'll see if people find it. And boy, did they find it. So I don't think it's strategic, but I think that people do kind of glom on to that shocking part of entertainment. And, you look at the twist ending. The twist ending is a big part of all entertainment. Agatha Christie. It goes back that far. Shocking people is a big part of entertaining them.
Andrew, we asked you to have a think about one of the big news stories to come this year. AI. Big news story, regardless of what industry you're in, just constantly. Why did you pick this out, and what do you want to say about it, I guess is my question.
I think we are going to see it become a clear and present danger to creative people because as it gets better and as it gets more capable of replicating the creative process, we're going to see more people probably lose their jobs, I think, in the creative industry. And not necessarily because they should, but because someone is looking at a balance sheet somewhere and going, well, we can save money by doing this bit with AI. And it's probably not going to be the big people. It's probably not going to be actors and directors and writers yet, but it is probably going to be some of the people that perform the functional jobs on a movie set or on a TV set or in a book editing process or all of the things that give us entertainment and make it great. And I think just recently I saw Lisa Kudrow. She watched a Robert Zemeckis film that came out recently called Here, which is set in one room over decades. It stars Tom Hanks and it sort of shows the growth of that room and what changes and what happens in that singular location. It's essentially one shot for 100 minutes. And she said that it terrified her because of all the AI presence in it and how AI was going to take those jobs. Now, everything I've ever seen that's been created by AI has been absolutely dreadful.
I was going to ask, or maybe we don't know.
I don't think we know, and I think that's the other thing I worry about, where it is being used and not being disclosed. For me, someone that loves art and entertainment, it genuinely makes life worth living, and if you take away the human part of it, I think you do take away its ability to connect with people. So I don't think it's going to kill entertainment, but I do think it is going to segment it quite heavily, where people that do have a connection with their audience, a really strong connection, can maintain that, because in the end it makes us human. But the big businesses that are going, well, we can do some of our stuff with AI, are going to probably find that it's not connecting with audiences and it's going to cause them a problem.
I listen to, on the Daily podcast, they do those Sunday conversations, and it was about that film and that whole process. And what the director Zemeckis was talking about was that they could have done a whole CGI thing, like that's how you would have told that story. They
CGI?
CGI is how they sort of overlay like big explosions and all that kind of stuff.
Computer generated
Yes,
imagery.
so the idea is...
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
That's all you need to say.
Big explosions is how I describe it.
Computer-generated imagery. Got
That's
it.
right. Okay. But they wanted Hanks. He's the guy who made Forrest Gump. So they wanted Hanks and Wright, who were the two main actors in that film, and how to take from when they were teenagers through to old age. That's the storyline, essentially. It's over decades. They couldn't do with makeup or CGI with Tom Hanks. Like, they could probably get Robin Wright to a certain point, you know, into her 20s and 30s, but they were never going to get Hanks
Looking that young again.
looking like a teenager. So this is where the AI tool, which they built specifically for this movie to do, it cost them about $50 million to build that AI tool. They said they probably could have done it with CGI, but it would have taken probably 2 years and would have had to employ 200-300 visual artists to actually make it work. So the view that there are positive creative outlets that you can actually use these tools for and tell stories in a way that is still authentic and can still connect with an audience. Although I have to say he was very much at pains to explain that this wasn't a cost exercise.
Yeah.
It was around the creative bit. It opens up some really interesting questions, doesn't it?
Did it work? Did he look young?
Well, that's why I wanted to ask whether you'd seen it. Did you believe
I've seen
it?
clips of it, and I thought it's maybe a touch ropey still. It's not quite there yet, but so here is on many critics' lists of the best films of last year. So it's not that it isn't. It's a soulless exercise by any stretch, but it's this kind of encroachment that I think a lot of people are going to worry about. And if they can use it to make better stuff and more creative stuff and stuff that we haven't seen before, and it's been used in AI has been used in video games, for example, for decades. So if they can use it for good purposes, that's great. But you know, there's a really big worry out there that it's not going to be used for the right purposes, and it's just going to be used to replace people.
And I assume on your point around disclosure, and this is the conversation we've been having about AI for a really long time, is how quickly can they legislate on these things? And I can only assume from what you're saying that there's no real rules around what you need to tell people you're doing.
No, not yet. I mean, there are rules in terms of the big strikes that happened recently with the SAG and the Writers Guild in Hollywood that have actually delayed a lot of the films. We're going to be getting a lot of content this year because there's so much of it was held over from 2024 because of those strikes. But there are lots of provisions in there around making sure that certain parts of what people do isn't replaced with AI.
Just those sort of shows that did get held over. If we thought that we had so much content coming at us last year, wait until this year because the tap has turned back on with all of that content coming down the line post those strikes.
A little while ago, the president of a network in the US called FX, John Landgraf, he said that we had reached peak TV, and that was in 2018, I think, and we went well beyond it ever since. There's so much stuff going up. But I do think that is another theme for this year, is whether some of the streamers start to wind back and focus a little bit more on quality over quantity. We've already seen that Marvel says they're going to do that. They're going to just not put out so much stuff because it really hurt their brand. And I think there's a lot of the streamers like Netflix and Disney Plus that are looking at that and going, yeah, maybe we just need to try and give our stuff a better shelf life.
We asked you to think about the sleeper issue as you see it, and I think this is so sound because it's such a huge blind spot for so many of us, and that is gaming.
Yeah, it's really interesting how gaming, even in modern mainstream media, is seen as something that people don't do. A personal story, a little while ago at the radio station I work at, and no one that was involved in this is there anymore, so I can tell this story. But I remember mentioning on air the Madden franchise, which is it's been running for 25 years. It's American football. It's the game comes out every year. It's like FIFA. So it's a huge deal. And I just mentioned it in passing, and someone came up to me and said, "Don't talk about video games. We don't. Our listeners don't play video games." So the audience of the radio station was probably 40 and up. The average player of a video game in Australia is 35. 80% of us play video games, 80%. So this is not a niche thing. And when we talk about video games, we're not just talking about Call of Duty, or we're not just talking about those sorts of big things.
Is it Wordle?
We're talking about Wordle. We're talking about Connections. We're talking about the little game, Fruit Ninja, or those Farmville, those sorts of games that we play and we don't think of them maybe as video games, but they absolutely are. As many men play video games as women, it's about 50-50 according to a study from last year. So this idea that it's this niche thing that only people under 20, particularly men under 20, do is just so antiquated. It is completely wrong. And it is, if you look at lists of the biggest franchises in the world, the most profitable franchise of all time is Pokemon. Like it is made $900 billion or something. It's crazy how much money it's made. The single piece of entertainment that's made the most money in a single day, could you have a guess at what that is?
I reckon it's...
Well, I think it might be something to do with video games.
It like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
it is Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto 5, 2013, made almost $1 billion in a day. So when people talk about video games as something that is just that's niche, or the kids do it, or it's not a big deal, is that is not only out of date now, that was out of date 10 years ago.
So for this year, you've said that Grand Theft Auto 6 could be coming.
Yes.
And
so
that could be one of the biggest stories of the year, therefore.
It will be the biggest thing in entertainment this year, no question, if it comes out. So video games are famously prone to being delayed. So at the moment it is scheduled for 2025, but there's every chance that it gets moved into 2026. But if it comes out, it will be the biggest thing in entertainment, bar none, no question. No matter what metric you use, users, money, cultural impact, it will be the biggest. If you go on any YouTube video, in the comments, you will see a reference to GTA 6 somewhere.
Yeah, there you go.
GTA 6. Now I know what that is.
Yeah. How big is it a blind spot for us?
Huge.
Massive.
Although I started tuning in a little bit, and you read the book too, Tomorrow and Tomorrow
we
and
were
Tomorrow,
talking about
which was really
before this,
interesting. What's the Apple TV show about?
Mythic Quest.
Mythic Quest, which I loved.
It's a terrific
series.
show, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the wonderful Australian actor in it, who
plays Poppy.
who plays Poppy, is just tremendous. And it's a big deal. I mean, did you know that there's a video game awards ceremony?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure I just don't know about it. But
exactly, because it's not on. No network has picked it up, so it's on YouTube.
I've often thought there's a couple of things I'm going to take up in retirement, and one of them will be properly gaming.
Yes.
I can see me at 65 playing Grand Theft Auto.
I'm
going to do it.
My girlfriend, Anya, I don't think would have ever considered herself a video gamer, but in 2020 she got into Animal Crossing like a lot of people did, and she's really grown to love it. And I think part of the problem is that people see it as, bang, bang, shoot crime. They see it as just a GTA type thing. But video gaming there are games about running a little farm in a country town and managing your crops.
I know, I want to shoot things. That's what I want to do.
I got plenty of those for you as well.
I'm like a blank face. Like you guys are looking at me going, I mean, it's a podcast, so you can't see, but I've got nothing to contribute here. I'm so sorry. But I do believe you when you say it's a big deal. We originally asked Andrew to do this episode on sport because sport is also one of his special interest areas of expertise.
Yeah.
But then we kind of realised sport is entertainment, so let's just fold it all in.
Let's do it.
You said to me, obviously last year we had the Olympics. We had a couple of pretty riveting footy finals, I would say. Some really good series. You said to me when we were in our production meeting for this episode, sport is the last broadcast entertainment. Just explain that a little bit. Yeah,
so in terms of what rates on traditional broadcast TV, so in Australia, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10, it's really just sport. So that's why... Evidenced by, even just sorry to interrupt you, but through this conversation we've not talked about any shows that have been on broadcast TV. No. And that's a real problem. They're not making. It's not that they're not making good shows. By the way, there's a show on 9 Now called A Remarkable Place to Die, which, full disclosure, a partner of my brother is in. But I thought it was really good, but it hasn't really cut through. I think because it's on broadcast TV. So, and this is as true in the UK as it is in Australia, as it is in the US, as it is pretty much anywhere in the world that has a really strong sporting market. The things that rate are live events. And so that's why reality TV and sport work so well because they're not the sort of thing that you will watch the next day, like a scripted TV show is. It's a moment, and you want to be involved in that moment on social media or with your friends or whatever it might be. So sport is kind of the last thing in broadcast TV that is a lock as in terms of being genuinely successful. And so I think that we could very well see a day where it's pretty much all that's on, because broadcast TV, they know that it works, but the streamers are still coming for it.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. You also said to me, I mean, we'll get to that, but you also said to me that there has been a tiny little resurgence in broadcast entertainment in the US.
Yeah, specifically
so is there
in
a
the
glimmer
US.
of sort of hope for broadcasters that entertainment could make a comeback, and how have they done that?
They've done that by kind of going back to basics. So in the US, probably the most popular show of the last few months has been a show called Matlock. Now you might go, hang on, I know what that is, and that's because it was a legal drama.
It's on my list.
Back in the 80s, but it's a really interesting reboot because they've gender swapped it. First of all, they've got Kathy Bates, one of the best actors in the world, playing the role of Matlock. But in the end, it is a case of the week. Legal drama. And they've just gone back to basics. They've found sort of really kind of middle of the road, in a good way, middle of the road ideas and concepts. And they found that the ratings, while they're not anywhere near what they were 5-10 years ago, have started just ticking back up again with the right sort of stuff. So I wonder if there's a lesson for the Australian content makers to maybe just make something a bit more kind of meat and potatoes rather than sort of swinging for the fences if you want to broadcast success.
And, you know, the crazy thing too, which is just so of its time, how I came across Matlock and this whole Kathy Bates reboot was via social media.
Yes.
And it was on social media, and I don't know, like how it sort of all gets in front of certain people. However, the content that was bubbling up for me was that she's lost 50 kilos to do this show. So it was interviews that she was clearly doing in the publicity rounds about Matlock and how exciting all of that was. And then it sort of takes you down that Matlock route. But the entry point was her personal story about what she's been doing and how she is and her health. And it's so much more complicated than just putting on a good show.
It is. And that's how important I think a star is as well. Still probably more so to TV than it is to movies.
Yeah.
Now, if she wasn't playing that role, I don't know that show is a success. But this is the other interesting thing about broadcast TV is that they release an episode a week. So people who are used to binging stuff, they kind of have to wait.
Slow down.
And not everyone is used to that now, particularly if you are turning into a streaming service.
It is. I think what's also interesting is obviously the advent of ads into streaming services, which makes it a lot more like the broadcast experience, and whether that's an opportunity for broadcast or to the detriment of streamers.
I think that's really interesting, and I think it's also really interesting, this idea. So when streaming first started, when Netflix first started making their shows, they went, well, we don't have to keep shows to 42 minutes, which is what they generally are for a broadcast hour in the US, but we can make them as long as we want. And that was terrible because they dragged on. There was so much editing that needed to be done for so many of those early shows. And so I think this idea that, okay, we've now got to factor in where the ads go in the show and how long the show is and how many ads we can fit into that show starts making them essentially think the same way that people making broadcast TV did in the 90s. And so everything old is new. It's funny how sort of cyclical this stuff can be, even as technology just leaps forward.
And to your point around what's AI going to replace, like you can see these new skills that are going to be required as far as organising and, you know, directing audiences, places, and like this whole range of skills that are going to crop up, whether AI can do that or not.
Yeah, no.
I'm not sure because it is editorial judgment around what you're putting where and how you're directing people places.
And there's an interesting, I've just seen this in the sort of the last few weeks, which is that when you go on Google and you look up a movie, they'll now have a little AI summary of what people are saying online about it. So they'll say users are saying this or viewers, critics have said this. And it's very dodgy because these things a lot of them are still in their infancy. But I am also interested in that idea about curation, which is obviously something I'm very interested in being a critic, of going, who can I trust to tell me whether something is good or not?
Yeah.
And I do think knowing people that you kind of share a taste with is going to be really important because you're not going to be able to. Spotify recommends me stuff all the time that I have zero interest in. So does Netflix. They have no idea what I care about. So I think finding people that you generally go, I kind of usually agree with those people, might actually become more important over time rather than less.
Andrew Williams.
Done.
I
It's not always going to be a winner.
It
is funny because whenever Claire recommends, I say to Sam, my husband, Claire's recommended this, and he says, "Okay, well, we'll watch it then." But like he trusts, some friends maybe less so. But if I say Claire said it was good, he'll be like, "Okay, we'll
give it a go."
I think in the discussions Claire and I have had in the office about things that we've watched, we've very rarely disagreed. There's
a Squiz trusted
that
tone.
I've been here.
A Squiz trusted recommendations. Meanwhile, I might just do books because I'm pretty useless.
Fabulous.
It's probably a good time to get your recommendations.
Yeah.
For the year. So what are you recommending?
Well, if you're interested in this topic and the way that entertainment evolves and changes, I really love a podcast, and I know that you love one of its sister podcasts, which is called The Rest is Entertainment. So if you've ever seen The Rest is Politics or The Rest is History, all of that suite. So this is Richard Osman, who writes the Thursday Murder Club series of books and also used to be a co-host on Pointless and hosts his own quiz show, and Marina Hyde, who is a fabulous columnist for The Guardian.
We've mentioned her columns
She's
a number of times.
She's a very, very funny, and she does not suffer fools. And it is Richard Osman is much more kind of like sort of
maybe
like let's give people the benefit of the doubt. She's like nah. So it's a fun dynamic between the two. But they look at everything from how darts is broadcast to how AI is affecting film to bad British accents in movies, and it's a really great podcast if this sort of thing interests you. Yeah, absolutely.
That's your podcast. What about your show?
My show, I have 3 shows that are my go-to recs at the moment. So if I don't know anything about you, I'm going to give you these 3 to see what happens, essentially. One is Slow Horses, which is the spy drama on Apple TV+, which I just think is an absolutely fabulous piece of television.
Claire furiously nodding.
That was my show of the year last year, and I'd saved the latest series for my Christmas watch, so I'm very happy.
Excellent. Yeah. I watched over Christmas as well, and it's just because I was saving it too, because it's just that sort of show that you do want to savour a little bit. Wonderful performances, and just across the board, I think it's fantastic. Almost nobody watches Apple TV Plus, I've learned, because when I recommend this show, they all go, "Oh, I don't have that."
I don't have that. Interesting.
And I've gone, I would have thought it would be more popular because a lot of people have the device, and it's just an easy thing to. But
there you go.
Anecdotally,
but with Apple, you can just buy. You can, which I quite appreciate.
You can buy the series.
Yeah.
Yes, you can do that as well if you just want one thing. But I actually think Apple TV Plus has the best standard of show. So as opposed to Netflix, where it's just like 90% slop and 10% good stuff, Apple TV has a really good quality control where most of the stuff they make is
the volume's a bit more restrained.
It is more restrained. So
on the curation point, there you go.
Yeah, so if you're thinking of buying one streaming service or just having one, I always recommend Apple TV Plus.
And if anyone's listening from Apple, yes, Andrew's new entertainment show is available to sponsor.
yeah. Please jump on board.
Done.
I mean, if you can spend $200 million on a lot of movies that nobody saw, then you can spend a little bit of money.
$200 on a podcast episode.
Exactly. Yeah. Surely.
Maybe a bit more.
If as much as you like. But the other 2 shows I want to recommend are on Disney Plus, which is Abbott Elementary, which we've talked about, which is just a wonderful sort of comfort watch sitcom, but also so sharp and so funny.
It's so nice.
It's really nice, but it's got some things on its mind too, which about education and gentrification and a whole range of societal issues. But it never does it in a way that it feels like you're taking your medicine. So that's really good. And then Shogun, I thought was the best show of 2024. So.
That was Siobhan's favourite too, I think. Yeah, she raved about it.
It's going to be really interesting because they've run out of book. So the first series was based on the book. There's no more book. So they commissioned it for season 2 and 3 because it was such a big hit. But what we saw with Game of Thrones is once they ran out of book, trouble started.
Yeah.
Just one quick Australian one. I mean, it's been running forever, but I do think it is the most reliable comedy on television, which is Have You Been Paying Attention? If we're talking about broadcast TV success, no one doesn't like Working Dog.
Comedy, like it's still a magic formula, isn't it? The Brits do it so well.
They do it brilliantly.
And that crew do it just incredibly well here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think actually for most of the year, that's other than news, the only thing that I'd watch on commercial TV.
Yeah, it's the only thing I will suffer through ads for.
All those recommendations in your episode notes. Andrew, well done.
Thanks
for joining us. Welcome to the year ahead.
I'm looking forward to it. This is my favourite time of year because there are lots of lists about most anticipated video games and TV shows and movies, and I'm just like a kid in a candy store at this time of year.
It's like Christmas for you.
Exactly.
There
Just
you
a couple
go.
of weeks later.
For more from us at The Squiz, for more Andrew, make sure you search for Squiz Today in your podcast app. It's our daily news podcast that gets you across the news every weekday. Hit follow on your podcast app to make sure you get that when it lands. On Saturdays, as I said, Claire, you and I host a podcast called The Weekly Wrap.
Indeed.
The week in news and what's coming up.
That's what it is.
It's what it is. It's perfect to keep up with the news in just 30 minutes. Across January, other year ahead episodes feature guests on fashion and lifestyle, on politics and on business. We reckon 2025 is the year to be informed, not overwhelmed, and the best place to achieve that is with The Squiz.